Drunk drivers who kill or seriously injure someone are required to submit to a blood alcohol test. That's the law. But the CBS 2 investigative team found that in some cases, these drivers are beating the system because hospitals aren't getting prosecutors the evidence they need. Pam Zeckman is here with another in her series of reports on loopholes in the law. Pam.
Antonio, getting this evidence is most critical when police don't do field sobriety tests or breathalyzer tests because the driver refuses or was injured in the crash and requires hospital care, like the driver you are about to meet who suffered a knee injury in the crash. He says he didn't see the hazard lights flashing on the disabled car before he plowed into it, killing 22-year-old Christine Lyons.
She always had a smile on her face. I miss her so much. I have her shoes at the front door, and I hope that God will send her back to us.
And she's been fighting for years to get this man, John Waddell, prosecuted for reckless homicide. The 29-year-old mechanic has a history of 10 moving violations, including speeding, negligent driving, DUI, and failing to avoid a previous accident.
He's had a previous DUI, and he's gone through the system, and he used the system for his own advantage.
After the crash, Waddell refused a police request for a blood test to check his alcohol level. In this report, police documented his reason why, quoting Waddell as saying, "I only weigh 140, man. I have 4 beers and I'm way over the limit."
If you were over your limit, why were you driving?
That's a question Waddell did not want to answer after a recent court appearance.
You ran into that girl's car on the roadway because you were impaired. Why did you drive?
The extent of his impairment was never documented by a blood test because doctors at Silver Cross Hospital in Joliet refused to forcibly take blood from Waddell, even though Will County State's Attorney Jeff Tomczak says the law allows, even requires hospitals to do it.
I was furious. I was absolutely furious.
Furious that police had to argue through the night with hospital staff about the law.
2, 3, 4 hours to the point where law enforcement officers were fairly convinced that there was no evidentiary value to the individual's blood any longer, and that was it. We lost our evidence.
That night, Waddell walked out of the hospital with no charges filed against him.
Without that blood evidence, we had no case until a witness came forward.
Then Will County Police went to work, spending hundreds of hours analyzing the car and the crash scene. They interviewed witnesses at bars Waddell was at that night, who said Waddell had at least 6 beers and a shot of liquor before the crash, evidence that could have been easily documented with a blood test.
It becomes the most crucial evidence in the case. When we don't have it, a lot of times we'll lose.
The case highlights a growing debate among hospitals, police, and prosecutors. Some hospitals argue that while the law requires drunk drivers involved in fatal or serious accidents to give blood, it does not say who must draw the sample when the driver refuses to cooperate.
When people volunteer and they're willing to cooperate, hospitals want to work with police and want to be as helpful as we can. But it's another thing quite different to fight with someone to try to stick a needle in their arm to draw blood.
We contacted 27 hospitals in the Chicago area and found that 48%, nearly half, refuse to take blood from drunk drivers unless it's required for medical treatment or the driver consents. Prosecutors like Tomczak think that's outrageous.
These are the worst accidents we're talking about, and it could result, and I'm sure has already in the state, resulted in these individuals remaining out on the road to hurt another person.
Tomczak has now convinced Silver Cross and other hospitals in Will County to do the test after arranging for police to hold down unwilling drivers. Meanwhile, Waddell has withdrawn his guilty plea in the case, meaning prosecutors may have to go to trial without that blood evidence. His attorney says that the police didn't really push for the blood test, and his client would have cooperated if they had. Antonio and Diane?
Thank you, Pam.